Episode 72, Avenge a Prophet, Abandon the Nation. Welcome to the Hidden and Distorted History of the Church series, where we will be looking at the historical aspects of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, also known as the Mormons. In this series, I will try and inform those unaware of the true facts of Mormon history. Recap. Last week, Almon Babbitt was appointed guardian of the Lawrence estate and immediately sues Joseph Smith's estate for damage. The Nauvoo City Council slashes the mayor's salary back to its modest pre-Smith level of $100. Meanwhile, Brigham Young began marrying Joseph Smith's widows, solidifying his grip on both the church and its inner circle. The Illinois legislature revoked the Nauvoo City Charter, while the secretive Council of 50 being reorganized, and Brigham Young formally anointed as prophet, priest, and king. This week, the Council of 50 actively debates plans to relocate the church beyond U.S. jurisdiction, weighing territories in Texas, Oregon, and California to build an independent, theocratic state. News of Texas's annexation by the United States forces them to abandon it as an option. Brigham Young halts the Relief Society to consolidate control during rising tensions. The Quorum of the 12 calls down divine vengeance on those responsible for Joseph Smith's murder, a sentiment that soon finds its way into temple ritual. By week's end, Young openly declares the intent to settle somewhere near the Great Salt Lake, revealing that plans for the westward move are already firmly in motion. You don't want to miss out on this episode. Part 1. Time for Relocation. In early 1845, the Council of 50, under Brigham Young's leadership, actively debated relocating the church outside the jurisdiction of the United States. With the Nauvoo Charter repealed in January 1845 and growing pressure from neighboring counties demanding the Mormons' departure, the council considered several potential sites for settlement. The council met and discussed the necessity of finding a place outside the jurisdiction of the United States where the saints might establish the kingdom of God, free from political interference. Council of 50 Minutes, February 1845, quoted in D. Michael Quinn, The Mormon Hierarchy. These included the Republic of Texas, which remained independent until its annexation by the U.S. later that year, Alta California, then part of Mexico, and the Oregon Country, jointly claimed by the U.S. and Britain, but not yet formally under U.S. control. The Council's discussions focused not merely on seeking safety, but on establishing an autonomous, theocratic kingdom governed by their interpretation of divine law, free from American legal oversight. This planning reflected a strategic effort to secure a place where the church leadership could exercise both civil and religious authority without interference. On March 11, 1845, news reached Nauvoo that the United States was moving to annex Texas, ending its status as an independent republic. The annexation effectively closed off Texas as an option for settlement. Upon receiving news of the annexation of Texas, it was agreed that Texas was no longer a viable refuge. Attention turned to Oregon and California, where the political situation offered more promise of autonomy. Council Minutes, March 11, 1845, summarized in Benjamin Park, Kingdom of Nauvoo. This development was significant in shaping the Council's subsequent migration planning in 1845-46, as they sought a location where they could govern according to their interpretation of divine law, without federal interference. The Brethren debated the challenges of moving westward, including securing treaties and the number of families required for a self-sustaining colony. The desire to establish God's law without interference was paramount. Minutes excerpt, March 1845, from surviving fragments published in the Council of 50, a documentary history. Part 2, closes the door on the Relief Society. When Brigham Young met with two groups of Latter-day Saint men in March 9, 1845, he foreclosed any possibility that Relief Society meetings might recommence that spring, as had been the pattern in previous years. Young was adamantly opposed to women resuming their meetings after a hiatus of nearly a year. Young's reasons can partially be surmised from his remarks to the men, featured in these excerpts from the minutes of the Nauvoo High Priest's Quorum and the Nauvoo 70s Quorums. The LDS Church tells us, as the 12 worked to unite the membership, complete the Nauvoo Temple, and cope with hostile outsiders, dissenting church members repeatedly contested their authority. 1. The movement toward organizational stability was tortuous, and what role, if any, the Female Relief Society might play in the developing structure was unclear. Tensions between Brigham Young and Emma Smith, Joseph Smith's widow and president of the Relief Society, likely fueled Young's concern about Relief Society meetings. Their differences centered on the working out of Joseph Smith's temporal and spiritual legacy, including the settlement of his estate, succession to church leadership, and the role of plural marriage in the church. Part 3. Blood Atonement is born. June 27, 1845, on the first anniversary of Joseph Smith's death, the Quorum of the 12 Apostles gathered and publicly offered a prayer calling for divine vengeance against those responsible for the prophet's murder. This prayer reflected the ongoing grief and desire for justice felt by church leadership and many members. Historically, records show that about 6 months later, this prayer, or a variation of it, was incorporated into the temple endowment ceremony as part of the oath or covenant taken by participation. Wilford Woodruff, a member of the Quorum of the 12, recorded in his journal on June 27, 1845, "We met on this solemn day, the anniversary of the martyrdom of the prophet Joseph, and offered fervent prayer to God that he would avenge his servant's blood upon those who shed it." In the Nauvoo Temple Endowment Ceremony, introduced in 1845, participants took a solemn oath commonly known as the Oath of Vengeance. This oath required members to covenant that they would pray to God to avenge the blood of Joseph Smith and other church leaders who had been murdered. It bound them to never cease calling upon divine justice against those responsible for the prophet's death, and in some versions, to use all their power to bring about earthly justice as well. The oath was part of the ceremony's covenant structure and symbolized the participants' loyalty to both God and the cause of seeking retribution for the martyrdom. This particular oath was later removed or modified in the 20th century as the Church revised the endowment ceremony. According to D. Michael Quinn, the Oath of Vengeance became part of the Nauvoo endowment, binding participants to seek divine justice for the prophet's death. It underscored the unresolved anger and trauma within the Church following the 1844 martyrdom. Early Mormonism and the Magic World View, 1998. On July 28, 1845, Jonathan Dunham, a Nauvoo militia leader who had been ordered by Joseph Smith to come to his aid during the attack at Carthage jail, died by suicide. His death occurred amid widespread turmoil and fear among church leaders following Smith's murder. Dunham's suicide was noted by contemporaries as connected to his feelings about the events at Carthage, but beyond that, the historical record is sparse on his personal motivations. Part 4. Plans for the Great Salt Lake. In August 1845, key LDS leaders received scouting reports about the Salt Lake Valley and its environs from early explorers and members who had traveled westward to assess potential settlement sites. These reports described the valley as a broad, high-altitude basin with fertile soil suitable for agriculture, abundant fresh water sources, and ample grazing land for livestock. Crucially, the region was located far from the established United States territories, which the Council of 50 and church leadership saw as beneficial for escaping legal and political pressures experienced in Illinois. The geographic isolation of the area promised a level of autonomy for the Latter-day Saints to govern themselves with limited interference. Additionally, the reports noted natural resources such as timber, game, and mineral deposits, all important for sustaining a growing community. These positive assessments bolstered confidence within the church leadership that the Salt Lake Valley could serve as the foundation for their envisioned kingdom of God on earth. A self-sufficient, theocratic society. This information directly influenced the decision-making process for the large-scale migration planned for 1846, helping to narrow the choice of destination among other Western territories like Oregon and California. The reports were a crucial factor in solidifying the Salt Lake Valley as the preferred site for settlement. By September 1845, after months of deliberation and changing circumstances, Brigham Young publicly declared the Saints' intention to settle somewhere near the Great Salt Lake. This announcement was not made lightly. It followed extensive discussions within the Council of 50 and church leadership about finding a remote, secure refuge outside the reach of U.S. jurisdiction. The Great Basin, particularly the Salt Lake Valley, offered several advantages. Geographic isolation. The Salt Lake Valley was situated deep in the Rocky Mountains and far from established American settlements, providing a natural buffer from government interference and hostile neighbors. Political considerations. Because the area was outside the formal boundaries of U.S. states and territories, it promised a chance for the saints to govern themselves according to their religious principles, without interference from state or federal authorities. Natural resources. Though challenging, the valley's fertile soil, water sources, and grazing land made it suitable for agriculture and raising livestock, essential for a self-sufficient community. Existing intelligence, reports from fur trappers, mountain men, and early explorers, though limited and sometimes vague, indicated that the valley could sustain a large settlement. Brigham Young's statement signaled a strategic shift from hoping to settle within or near U.S. territory to embracing a more isolated, long-term refuge. This declaration mobilized the church's preparations for the arduous trek west, including organizing pioneer companies and securing supplies. In essence, Young's announcement crystallized the vision of establishing a new Zion, a theocratic community where the church could build its society unimpeded by the political and social conflicts that had plagued them in the Midwest. The popular narrative that Brigham Young spontaneously decided to settle the Salt Lake Valley upon first seeing it is more myth than fact. In reality, by the time Young announced the intention in September 1845, the church leadership had already been actively considering and researching the Salt Lake area for months. The decision was the result of careful planning, scouting reports, though limited, and strategic deliberations within the Council of 50, as we saw. The first group of Mormon pioneers who entered the valley in 1847 were following through on a plan that had been in the works well before their arrival. So, rather than a sudden, divinely inspired moment of choosing the spot upon arrival, it was a calculated choice based on political, geographic, and practical considerations developed over time. I hope you learned something new. Smash that like button, hit subscribe, and follow for more no-fluff, ex-Mormon content that cuts through the faith-promoting fog. Please watch for future videos, and thank you so kindly for watching. This is the Ex-Mormon Informant signing off for the day.